The restaurant was nearly silent when Alexander Hale noticed her. The polished floors gleamed under the soft dim lights, chairs already stacked neatly on tables, but in one corner booth, a figure lay curled up against the red vinyl. Her long hair spilled over her arm like a shadow, her worn uniform wrinkled and stained from hours of labor. She had fallen asleep with her cheek pressed against the cool tabletop, a notebook beside her filled with messy numbers and tiny sketches of flowers. Something about the sight stopped him. Alexander, the billionaire CEO who had walked into this small neighborhood diner, dressed as an ordinary man in a navy jacket and worn jeans, suddenly couldn't look away. He came here for anonymity, for quiet meals that reminded him of his father's working class days. But tonight he found something that shook him. Why would a young woman, clearly exhausted, choose to sleep in a booth rather than go home? The night air outside still carried the echo of rain, faint droplets clinging to the glass. The hum of the refrigerator behind the counter filled the silence. Alexander cleared his throat softly. "Miss," he said, his voice careful, as though not to frighten her. Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment she looked disoriented, then sat up quickly, brushing her tangled hair back, cheeks flushed. "Oh, I'm sorry, I must have." She glanced around and pressed her lips together tightly. "I wasn't supposed to. I'll leave." He studied her more closely. Her name tag read Sophie. She looked barely 22, though her eyes carried the weight of someone much older. Dark circles pooled beneath them, and her hands, resting on the table, were dry and reddened from constant scrubbing. She slid the notebook into her bag, and as she did, he noticed the duct tape holding the strap together, fraying at the edges. "No need to apologize," Alexander said quietly. "You must have had a long shift." Her voice was low, almost embarrassed. "Double shift, actually. Triple," manager called out. She tried to smile, but it faltered. "Sometimes it's easier to close my eyes here than go back home." Something in the way she said home made him lean in slightly. "Why's that?" She hesitated, twisting the strap of her bag. "It's just cold. Place isn't really heated. And my little boy." She stopped herself, biting her lip as if she had revealed too much. "You have a son?" Alexander asked, keeping his tone soft. Sophie nodded. "He's 5, Daniel. Sweetest kid you'd ever meet. Loves to draw superheroes." Her eyes lit up for just a moment before dimming again. "We've been in a one-bedroom apartment since his father passed. Lost his job then. An accident." Her words trembled, but she pushed them out. "I'm doing my best. It's just, sometimes best doesn't cut it." Alexander felt a tightness in his chest. He remembered his own mother, widowed young, working nights at a bakery while he slept in the back room. He remembered the flickering bulb in their kitchen, and the empty fridge she tried to disguise with jars of water. "Does Daniel stay alone when you're here this late?" he asked. "No. My neighbor checks in. She's kind, but she has 3 kids of her own. I can't keep leaning on her." Sophie's fingers fidgeted over the edge of the table. Her nails were uneven, a few broken. "I'm saving for daycare, but most days it's bus fare or dinner. Can't always have both." Alexander's gaze drifted to her shoes. Sneakers with worn soles peeling at the sides, laces knotted and gray. He thought of the glossy leather loafers in his car trunk, hidden tonight so no one would guess his wealth. He thought of the penthouse with its panoramic windows and refrigerator filled with imported fruit. The contrast made his throat tighten. She noticed his silence and straightened a little, defensive. "I didn't mean to unload all that. You're a customer, and I'm just—" She gave a shaky laugh. "Just the waitress who fell asleep on the job. You're more than that," Alexander said before he could stop himself. She blinked at him, startled, as if no one had spoken to her with such conviction in a long time. Her lips parted, but no words came. Hook. Outside the diner, headlights flashed as a car pulled up, then drove away. Sophie flinched slightly at the sight, her hand going instinctively to her bag. He noticed. "Someone bothering you?" he asked. She shook her head quickly, though her eyes darted nervously toward the window. Just landlord, he's been driving by. Rent's overdue again. If I don't have it by Friday, Daniel and I. She stopped, swallowing hard. We'll lose the place. The weight of those words pressed down between them. She tried to smile again, though her eyes shone with tears she refused to let fall. She lifted her chin, a small act of dignity. Anyway, I'll be fine. I always figure something out. Alexander studied her, heart pounding with an urgency he couldn't yet name. She was proud, resilient, but balancing on the edge of collapse. He wanted to tell her who he really was, that he could erase her landlord's threats with a single call, that his signature on a check could transform her life overnight. But revealing too much, too soon, might shatter the fragile trust forming between them. Instead, he said gently, "You don't always have to figure everything out alone." Her eyes searched his, wide and uncertain. For the first time that night, silence felt charged, a pause holding something deeper than exhaustion or small talk. And as the hum of the refrigerator filled the space, Alexander knew this was only the beginning of a choice that would test both of them. Sophie stared at him as though he'd spoken a language she hadn't heard in years, words of comfort, not pity, but then she shook her head, brushing back her tangled hair with trembling fingers. "That's sweet, but no one's coming to save me. Life doesn't work that way." Alexander wanted to argue, but he bit it back. She had probably heard promises before, empty ones. Instead, he stood and motioned toward the door. "At least let me walk you home. It's late." Her instinctive refusal came quick. "I don't need," but then she caught the reflection of headlights again outside the glass, slowing as though watching. Her jaw tightened, and she nodded reluctantly. "Fine, just to the corner." They stepped into the cool night, the pavement damp from earlier rain. The contrast was sharp, his leather jacket still warm from the diner's heat, her thin hoodie already soaked at the edges. She hugged her bag close, sneakers slapping softly against the concrete. As they walked, Alexander asked, "How does Daniel like school?" She smiled faintly, the first real smile he had seen. "He's in kindergarten, loves it, comes home with paint all over his sleeves, proud of the mess." Her eyes softened. "He's the reason I keep pushing. If it weren't for him, I don't think I'd have the strength." When they reached her building, the sight pierced him. The paint on the door was peeling, and an eviction notice curled under the tape, fluttering slightly in the breeze. The stairwell light above the entryway flickered weakly, casting a sickly yellow glow. Sophie shifted uncomfortably. "Thanks for walking me. I'll be okay from here." He wanted to argue, but she had already slipped inside. From the shadows of the street, Alexander watched her climb the stairs. Her shoulders were tense, every step weighted. Then the door closed, leaving him with the image of her weary silhouette and that notice taunting the world with her fragility. The next morning, Alexander sat in his office, eyes overlooking the city. Sunlight poured through the glass, catching on polished floors and sleek furniture. His assistants scurried in and out, arms filled with files and tablets. But all he could see was Sophie's tired eyes, her son's name written in that fraying notebook. He called for his secretary. "I need a file. A diner called Elliott's Place on 7th. See who owns it, and get me rental records for the complex on Harper Street, apartment 2B. His assistant blinked. "Sir, do it quietly," Alexander said firmly. By evening, he was back at the diner. Sophie stood behind the counter, hair tied back in a messy bun, uniform freshly laundered but still faded. She was serving coffee to a group of truckers when she spotted him. Her lips curved slightly, cautious but warmer than last night. "Back again. Best coffee in the city," he said with a half-smile. She arched a brow. "It's instant." He chuckled, and for a moment the heaviness between them lifted. But as the crowd thinned, he slid into the booth and motioned for her. "Sit a minute, on break." She hesitated before sliding across from him, tucking her hands in her lap. He leaned forward. I meant what I said last night. You don't have to do everything alone. Her defenses rose instantly. If this is some kind of charity thing, I can't. I don't want pity. It's not pity, Alexander said firmly. It's opportunity. You work harder than anyone I've seen, and you're raising a boy by yourself. That's not weakness, that's strength. But even the strongest deserve support. Her throat tightened and she looked away, blinking fast. Support always comes with strings. Not this time, he said. Then carefully he slid a folded envelope across the table. This is for your rent, paid in full, no strings. Her breath caught. She didn't touch it at first, eyes darting from his face to the envelope, then back. Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me. Alexander's jaw clenched. The truth hovered on his tongue, but he held it back. Because I do know what it feels like to be where you are, to be one step away from losing everything. Tears glimmered in her eyes. She pressed her lips tight, then finally pushed the envelope back toward him. I can't. If I take it, I'll owe you something. People don't just give. His heart ached at the rawness in her words. He pushed it back toward her gently. Sometimes they do. The moment stretched between them, heavy and fragile. At last her hand trembled as she pulled the envelope into her lap, holding it as though it might vanish. She whispered, if this is real, then maybe Daniel and I get to stay one more month. 1 month can change everything, he said softly. Later, outside the diner, Sophie stood under the street lamp, staring at the envelope clutched in her hands. Her face was streaked with tears she had finally allowed to fall, but her posture carried something new, a fragile thread of hope. Inside his car across the street, Alexander sat watching, torn between revealing the truth and keeping his secret. He wanted her to know he was more than just another customer, but he also wanted her to believe that kindness could exist without hidden motives. And as she disappeared into the night, her figure small but unbroken against the vast city, he realized this was only the beginning. Tomorrow would demand a choice from him, one that could change both of their lives forever.